Hey guys, what is going on? So a few days ago, I unboxed a brand new Pixel 2 XL. And I used it for a few days, and today it's time to give my thoughts. Now normally, when I get a new phone, I set it up with Nova. And it looks something like this. But, you don't buy a Pixel to just cover it up with a launcher afterwards. Because back then, all the big YouTubers were praising it, everyone was using it, all the big YouTubers, this is the only phone they had. And the newer Pixels, they got like a lot of hate. This is the Pixel that got the least hate out of all the other Pixels that came out after this. So this is my experience with this phone. First off, I never knew I'd like stock Android because I used phones that had like near stock Android, but I think like stock Android 10 is something that I can work with. But the previous versions, I never really liked that much. So I've enjoyed the stock Android experience. It looks clean, everything runs fine. And you see what happened here, right? These are one of the issues that I want to address. The rotation. The rotation, oh my god, it's killing me. I'm lying in bed watching a video. Boom, all of a sudden, rotates. Reading a text, browsing the web, it always rotates prematurely and it annoys the crap out of me. Now this phone has something called a squeeze assistant. I think I'm thinking right. Where you squeeze the phone, and this pops up. Mine isn't really set up, so we're just gonna... This became more annoying than helpful for me because, first of all, I don't use assistants. I mean, if I do, I just use this. I just tap and say, "What's the weather today?"
Tonight in Tel Aviv, it's predicted to be 66
See?
degrees and clear. Currently it's 69 degrees and partly cloudy.
That's the closest I get to using an assistant. I just use this attachment over here. And for some reason, why can't I move it? Why does it have to be stuck at the bottom? I don't know. This is some hardcore Android thing. I don't know. I can't explain it, but I like it in the middle, like here. No, the performance. I may have had a bit of high expectations because this was a flagship after all, but the phone feels snappy, but a lot of the time I'm experiencing frame rate drops and lag here and there. Let's see if I can show you what I mean. That's how the phone performs most of the time, but sometimes you're just gonna get a tiny bit of stutter. So performance is still great, especially with the new Android 10 update with the gestures. It's just a great phone to use. Now display. This is an OLED display, but that doesn't mean it's a good display. I mean, it's a decent display, but I mean, this display isn't as vibrant and as sharp as the newer phones or the Samsung phones from this era. It's not the best display, but it's also not the worst. I mean, I'd say it's decent. Just, I don't know, maybe I just been exposed to all these amazing displays, so this one seems like pretty bad to me. No, the dual speakers are great. I mean, they're great. They're front facing. This is the first phone I ever had that has front facing speakers, and I'm going to show you how it sounds like. Now, the speakers are really nice. I mean, the sound is nice and clear, but it's just not as loud and not as high quality as the newer phones. I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm going to play the same thing on my Realme X50 Pro. Alright, Pixel 2 XL. Realme X50 Pro. So you see how much better the speakers here are. I mean, even if the bottom speaker isn't front facing, it doesn't matter because the speakers on the Realme phone are just better. But did the phone age well in that category? The speakers, yeah, it did obviously, especially since not all phones even have dual speakers even today. Now, the design. I always liked the design. So it has one camera, and I kind of miss the days where phones only had one camera. Now everyone's going crazy with all these fucking insane camera setups, especially the S20 Ultra. This feels like middle, but it doesn't feel like the most premium type of middle. And this phone is really light. Like this phone is really light. I don't know it's because I'm used to the mammoths of phones we get today, but this phone, I mean, it's light. If you come from something like an S20 Ultra, then you'll notice the difference right away. That's the first thing I even noticed. The buttons, I'm not a really big fan of the buttons. I mean, sure, they're clicky, but the power button feels kind of flimsy. And remember, this phone is brand new, so it's not something that happened over time. This phone came like this out of the box, where the power button just doesn't feel that secure. Now, I do like the fact that we have a rear-facing fingerprint sensor, and it's really easy to find it because it's pretty well recessed into the body. So we're gonna do a quick speed test to show you guys what I mean. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. So it's fast, reliable, really have no complaints for the fingerprint sensor. Now durability, this one has been out for like about 3 years, 2.5 years. And there's no really major durability flaws. The only thing that I noticed is that the screen is getting really scratched up only after a few days. Like, let me show you what I mean. So as you can see over here around the bottom corner, I'm getting... Look at all these micro scratches. I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, I let literally only like 3-4 days and the screen is already full of scratches. I mean, I took care of this phone. I didn't drop it. I didn't slam it against any surfaces. I mean, I would have used a screen protector if I could. I know one came with the phone, but it was pretty shit. Like I installed it right, and it was full of boas. But that's just the seller. And I would have used the case, but look at this case. Like, tell me you wouldn't use this case. Like, look at it. It's so ugly. And this isn't some protective material. That's how the case is. I mean, why couldn't you just make a clear case? Why did I have to add this weird color or whatever this is? And they couldn't even add buttons for the case. They just put holes and it makes them even harder to press. So I just said I'd rather use the phone without a case than use that case. Now, always on display. I mean, I always liked always on display, but they take a lot of battery. I mean, not that much, but they take a good amount of battery. I like what the newer phones did and just tap to see that on display. Like, who needs it on all the time? Why can't we just have a feature to tap the phone and just see it that way? So it's on for 10 seconds and no more. Now the camera. How is the camera? Well, you might remember all the big YouTubers saying, oh my god, this is the best camera ever. And it is. It's a really good camera, but not the best camera today, of course. The camera is still aged very well. And that's thanks to the software that's getting updated. The camera itself, the pixels is just the software that's doing all the work. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to show you some samples I took. But first, let's take our selfie. But, putting all that aside, is this phone worth it in 2020? Should you get it? And with all the choice that's out there, I mean, it's kind of hard to recommend this phone. But if you want a cheap Android with stock Android that's gonna get updates for a few more years, then I would get this phone. Yeah, I mean, this phone is absolutely usable in 2020. I mean, we got a Snapdragon 835, 4 gigs of RAM. What 4 gigs may sound like, oh my god, it's so little. My phone has 16 gigs of RAM. I can't go any less or I'll start lagging. 4 gigs of RAM is fine for budget or mid-range phones, but not for flagships today. Back then when this phone came out, it was still acceptable, but now it's not. But that doesn't mean that this phone doesn't have enough RAM. RAM has just been hyped so much. You can use 4 RAMs just fine, and you're not gonna notice any difference between the 4 and the 6 gig. Me personally, I would buy a phone that has at least 6 gigs of RAM, because that way you're safe and they're kind of future-proofing your phone. But you shouldn't be bummed out because your phone has 4 gigs of RAM. And I just went on a whole rant on RAM. Alright, let's just move on. Okay, we got a Snapdragon 835, 4 gigs of RAM. We got an amazing camera. This phone ticks almost all the bells and whistles. But there are better options out there. I can't name any off the top of my head, but I just know there are. If you still have this phone and you don't want to upgrade and you feel like you need to upgrade because society is telling you, then just screw them. There are some phones that the RAM got messed up and it started lagging. I don't think that's with all the Pixels, but I would look at Xiaomi and Realme, even Samsung, companies like those, before you decide to buy a Pixel 2 XL. Because there's a downside in buying old phones, and they're just gonna age faster. Popular quote from Mr. Who's the Boss. So I can't really recommend you to get this phone. I mean, everyone is different. Everyone has different needs. So it's really hard to tell you if this phone is what you should get in 2020. But if you do, let's say you do, then most of the chances are that you won't be disappointed. By the way, I got the Redmi K30 Pro and the Realme X50 Pro. If you want to see reviews of these phones, then let me know in the comments. These are both the Chinese variants, so it's very interesting how they will perform. What do you think? Alright, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.